All right, so you're ready to dive into this. We're talking hobbies. Everyone has them. You sent over this English learning podcast episode. Pretty interesting stuff. Two hosts, Marco and Erica. And it goes way deeper than just like listing what people do for fun.
Yeah, it is interesting how they kind of weave that language learning thing, right, into talking about your hobbies.
Oh, yeah.
Like the practical side of things. How do you actually talk about this stuff in English, especially with somebody new?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't just like throw you out there, to the wolves, Marco and Erica. They start with those like really basic phrases I feel like everybody needs. I enjoy, I love, or I'm passionate about. And then, of course, you just say the hobby.
The thing I think that's so smart is they emphasize like adding a personal touch to that. Like Erica's example. I love cooking because it allows me to explore different cultures through food. Yeah. It's like a little explanation. Instead of just being basic, it's a little glimpse into who you are.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, okay, we've got our own hobbies, like how to talk about them. But how about asking other people? I noticed Marco and Erica had some good advice for that, too.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They're really into those open-ended questions like, what do you like to do in your free time? Do you have any hobbies? Or my favorite, what are you passionate about? That one just seems to like get people more excited.
For sure. And it's not even just about asking the right questions. It's also about how we listen and respond, too, right?
Absolutely. Active listening is what they call it. And they actually like break it down with examples too. Like if somebody says, I love photography, don't just be like, oh, that's cool. Keep it going. Ask them, what kind of photos do you like to take? Be curious. Connect with the person.
Which actually, that makes me think about Marco's story about trying to photograph birds. Apparently, it takes a lot of patience to get a good shot.
I mean, and that's where it gets really interesting. It's not just like a funny story. It's like an analogy for learning English, too. Like you realize to master bird photography, it's just like learning English. It takes time, persistence, and like observing and learning from every try.
It's a good point. Like we always focus on the end goal, right?
Yeah.
Fluency, the perfect picture. But it's like those little struggles along the way that teach you the most. It seems like Marco and Erica are really good at seeing the good side of those challenges.
Oh, totally. It's like they turn those setbacks into opportunities to grow. Think about Erica's story about that souffle that totally flopped. She didn't get bummed out. She laughed about it, learned from it.
Okay, so they're telling stories, but it feels like there's more to it than that.
It's subtle, but smart. They're using storytelling to make the conversation better, more relatable, more engaging. Like when Marco was talking about learning guitar, he was talking about how much effort he had to put in. And that dedication probably helps him in other areas of his life too, not just music. And Erica, with the souffle, just shows how positive she is and how she learns from her mistakes. It gives you a little peek into who they are, what they value.
So it's not just about like rattling off your hobbies. It's about using them to share something a little deeper about ourselves.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really interesting point. They say that hobbies, on top of just being fun, can also teach you valuable life lessons, like patience, mindfulness, perseverance, just to name a few.
Yeah, and those aren't just like random ideas, right? Like those are real skills you can use in other parts of your life.
That's what's so cool about it. Think about all that patience you build up making a recipe, or all that focus you get from painting. That stuff can help you at work, in your relationships, how you face any challenge, really.
So it's not just fun and games. Hobbies are like secret training for important life skills.
Exactly. And don't forget the social part of it, too. Like Marco was saying, how joining clubs or online groups for your hobby is a really great way to meet people who are into the same stuff as you. You get to make new friends and practice English in a fun, natural setting.
It's like a win-win. Connect with people, your English gets better, you don't even realize you're learning. It's like they're saying, don't just learn English, live it.
Exactly. Now, before we move on, there's an important point they made about how to actually do all this. Marco and Erica, they really want you to actually use the phrases like actually try them out. They even say to practice in front of a mirror.
I can see that helping.
It might feel a little silly, but it helps you feel more confident.
It's like anything new, right? The more you do it, the easier it gets. And let's be real. We've all been there where you're thinking too hard about how to say something, and you end up sounding like a robot.
Totally. And that's why it's so cool that they're like, don't be afraid to make mistakes. They compare it to any other hobby. It's not about being perfect. It's about like enjoying the process. Even the mess ups, every mistake is just a chance to learn and do better.
It is nice to hear that. It's so easy to get caught up in trying to be perfect, especially when you're learning something new.
And that's what makes their approach so good. They're not just teaching you words, they're like teaching you how to think about challenges. Like
Hmm.
to celebrate the progress you make. Think about those bird photos that Marco took, like the perfect ones. I bet he had to take a ton of photos to get those. Probably a lot of blurry ones in there too.
So you're saying it's not about avoiding making mistakes, it's about what you learn from them.
Exactly. And that brings us to another cool thing they talk about. It's subtle, but they kind of hint at how hobbies can help your writing in English too, not just speaking.
Oh, really? I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, so think about it. Let's say you love gardening. You could start a blog in English, share tips, talk about how your garden's doing, maybe even connect with other gardeners you know from all over.
It's like your hobby gives you all these ideas for things to write about. And the more you write, the easier it is to express yourself in English. It's like you're practicing without even realizing it.
That's the idea. You're not just learning grammar from a book. You're using it to talk about something you're really into.
Mm.
And you can tell when somebody's passionate about something you know. It makes it more interesting, more real.
That's a really smart way to take what you learn from a textbook and actually use it. You're not just learning words, you're sharing your experiences.
Exactly. And it works both ways, too. The better you get at writing in English, the easier it is to talk in English, too.
They build on each other. It's like a positive feedback loop.
Now, they don't say this directly, but what Marco and Erica are doing is tapping into this powerful thing. It's called intrinsic motivation.
Okay, what's that?
Basically, it means you enjoy doing something for the sake of doing it. Like you're not doing it for some reward. You just like it. So when you connect English to something you're already passionate about, like your hobby, it's way easier to stay motivated. You're not studying just to pass a test. You're learning so you can share your passion,
Yeah,
with everyone.
makes sense. Like when you're totally into a hobby, you lose track of time. You're just in the moment. And if you can get that same feeling with English, it's not a chore anymore. It's something you actually like doing.
Exactly. And that's so important because when you enjoy something, you do it more often. So you get better faster.
That reminds me of what Marco was saying about practicing those phrases for talking about hobbies.
Yeah.
It might feel weird at first,
Yeah.
but you do it enough, it becomes second nature. And then suddenly you can talk about all this stuff in English without even thinking about it.
It really shows you how important practice is. When you enjoy it, you do it more. You make tons of progress.
It's like they're saying, don't just learn English, enjoy the ride. And the ride's more fun when it's something you love.
Okay, so thinking about Marco and Erica and everything they said, there's a big question for you, the listener.
Yeah, it's time to think about ourselves for a minute. Like,
Yeah.
what are you passionate about? What really gets you going? And how can you use that stuff, those hobbies that you love, to help you learn English?
That is a really good question. It makes you think about how those things you do for fun can actually help you grow, like as a person and with English too.
Yeah, it's almost like they're saying to stop separating all the different parts of your life, like work, hobbies, learning English, and find a way to bring them together.
Yeah.
Like they can actually help each other.
And that's what makes this so cool. It's not just about like, okay, how can I use my hobby to practice English? It's about like, what can I learn from this that I can use in other areas of my life too?
So like, how do we actually do that? How do you take something like, I don't know, photography and use that to help with English?
Well, first you got to think about like what skills does your hobby teach you? Like with photography, you have to pay attention to details. You have to think about composition. You have to like capture the moment.
And those aren't just photography skills,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Like paying attention to detail. That can make your writing better. That sense of composition can help you tell stories better. And capturing the moment, that can help you write really great descriptions.
Oh, so you're not just like writing about your hobby, you're using the skills you learned from your hobby to be a better writer.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. It's like your hobby turns into this awesome tool to learn English.
And helps you grow as a person too.
For sure. And don't forget what Marco said about joining clubs or groups online. That's a really great way to meet other people who speak English and who like the same stuff you do. Imagine talking about photography or gardening or movies, all in English.
That sounds fun. Plus, you'd be practicing your English and you'd be with supportive people, so it's not so scary to make mistakes.
Yeah, and you know what else you can do? Just think about your hobbies in English. Like when you're gardening, just imagine you're describing the plants in English. Or like the steps for planting something. Or when you're cooking, imagine you're explaining it to someone in English.
It's like a little brain workout,
Yeah.
but way more fun than just studying. And the more you do it, the easier it is to just automatically think in English.
Totally. And that's when it really clicks.
Mhm.
When English just becomes part of how you think every day, that's when you know you're really getting it.
So as we wrap this up, I think the big takeaway is don't ignore your passions. Those hobbies that you love, those are important. You can use those to learn English and just grow as a person too.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to try new things. Find creative ways to connect your passions with English. You don't have to learn from just textbooks and classes. You can learn by doing the things you love.